Feel free to grab a sandwich and a Coke and a cup of tea. And also feel free to bunch up too. If I go
Sign that contract yet?
Akatira tātou mā. Me tīmata tō tātou I korona. Nei, Stella. Tā reira hei tīmatanga mo tēnei huhunga māku e tuku atu tētahi karakia. Nā reira ki ainunga e tātou. E pātua matu I te rangi, e nei mātu a ponoma e toroku tōnei ki tō aroaro e whakawhetai ana ki a koe mō ngā manaakitanga o tēnei rangi. E whakawhetai ana ki a koe, ko taia mātou te hui tahi ai ki a wānanga hia, ngā take e pāna ki tō tātou whenua o te oroa. E ino atu ki a koe, ke manakitia hoki o mātou tini whānau, aha tō kei hea, rātou e māwiwi ana, e taumaha ana, e tangi ana. Nā reire e pātou matua e ino atu ki a koe e rungi tingo tapu o tō tātou kaiwhaktora I Ukraiti Army. Nā reire e oku tuakana oku tuahine tēnā rā koutou. Nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai ki a rongo ai ki ngā kōrero o mātou, ngā pai kōranga pū. E hihana ki a haka māramatia, ki a haka mōhiotia I a koutou ngā take e pāna ki tāo Māori I roto I tāhua tūtea. Me ngā take o tēnei takiwā. Nā reira, nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai, pika nia mai, ngā tini āhuatanga kei rongo o koutou pongowhipi, kia utaina mai ki rongo I ngā mate o mātou. Ko tōku hoki, konei tana moko puna kua mati I ngā matira. Tērā tētahi mate nōku no roto te kāretu, toku whanaunga, o hinga atu I tērā tūrā, nā reira, rātu katoa, haere atu rāpatahi te kōrero mā rātou, haere mai haere. Engari, ka oki mai ki a tātou ngā kanuiora me ngā tini take o te wā, ngā kaupapa ki a kōrero hia, nā reira, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, kia rā mai ngā tātou katoa. Thank you all very much for being here this afternoon. Myself and Willie have been engaged in a around the country sort of tour talking about the Māori budget. To predominantly Māori audiences, and since that kaupapa was finished, now I'm starting my Tai Tokerau travels and talking about the budget here in West Auckland first of all, then Dargaville, Kaipuhe, Kaitaia. We've already had a hui in Whangarei. So thank you very much for being here and engaging with us on the budget. So I'd like to welcome Willie. I'd also like to welcome local Member of Parliament, Venushi Walters from Upper Harbour, just around the corner. And Venushi's here, and she would like to talk about some of the aspects relating to what's in the budget for the local area. So really we'll have a bit to say. We're really keen to engage with any partai that you may have. And, you know, we don't want this just to be us lecturing or talking to you. We want you all to be engaged. But we're just really grateful and thankful that you're taking time out of your busy days to be here and have this conversation with us. So the way we'll go, we probably won't even take an hour. Willie will start up with a general overview of the budget. Venushi will talk about the local stuff. I'll talk about a few things in my portfolios, and then we'll open up to, for questions. So hopefully that's fine with everybody. Just like to acknowledge Dave Tanenui, who works in my office here in West Auckland, as well as Yasmin Ray over there in the back corner, who also works in my office, and the young man beside who is Mukai Dura Hura, who is my youth MP. And we'll be travelling to Wellington in a couple of weeks' time with all the other youth MPs who they'll engage in political debate down in Wellington. So, with those few words, Kurirani tō tātou whare, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kelvin, Matariki, kaupapa tēnei ata. Venushi, nui kia kōrero. Koutou katoa tai mai nei tēnei wā, I whakarangatira te kaupapa I tēnei wā. E mihi nui tēnei kia koutou, e woneri nui ki te hara mai wainga nui a koutou. Ki te whakamārama tēnei a kaupapa te kūte e tāng ki te tāpua. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, hara mai, nau mai, kia ora, come in, lovely to have you. Really nice to be here to come and give my mate some tautoko, because these types of hui are really important for us. And please, you've come out in the middle of the day. Nice to have a good little crowd here to come and have a listen. I just finished having lunch with your local Maori Party President, John Tamahere, and I reminded him of his history and his whakapapa. And he just lives around the corner, actually. I reminded him of the sort of position we're in right now in terms of Māori. And don't get me wrong, he's old nation and everything else, but the game we play is going to be crucial in terms of next year. And I have to remind John, because he just took on this presidency for the Māori Party, that when they give us a bit of a boot, about how minimal the budget is in terms of Māori, it does play into the other party's hands. And I also reminded him that the budgets that we are getting in terms of Māori members are 10 times the amount that the Māori Party was getting when they were in. And people don't actually understand that sometimes, but that's why I like utilising these sorts of kui to just remind people. And don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-Māori Party. I think Kelvin's probably more anti-Māori Party than me, but I've been part of that system. I came from that setup, but I also understood how restrictive it was, because in their last budget, just to give you an idea, their last budget in 2017, I think it was, was 2017 was $120 million in terms of targeted funding for Māori. $120 million in terms of targeted funding for Māori. Because Māori get a lot of support through mainstream too. So I'm just talking about the targeted funding. That was in 2017. Our last three budgets work out to $1 billion per year in terms of targeted funding for Māori. We're just over $3 billion. That's the type of difference that you can get when you've got numbers and when you've got scale. And so I have to remind John about this, because they're getting into an area where they could be kingmakers next, or queenmakers next year. And I says, don't when you start running this line that, it's still bugger all, you're forgetting where we were. And we're getting into the game now. We're getting into the game now. We're still a fair bit off in terms of equity, but the former Māori Party and the former groups of National and Labour never got anywhere near the sort of funding and resourcing that we're getting. You know, it's record resourcing in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of employment, and what it does, it gives us an opportunity. And then on top of that, you know, you've seen through this budget, one of the big initiatives that we've put in place is the Māori Health Authority. Again, I said to John, you know, I heard Rawari, who went to school around here, might I add, his son-in-law, talking about the Māori Health Authority. And as I said to John, your wife is on the Māori Health Authority. We've got your wife on the Māori Health Authority. We've got our biggest critics like Tūreiti Moxon on the Māori Health Authority. We had your father-in-law do the design for the Māori Health Authority. You know, we can't do everything, and we've got enough pūtea, we believe, to get that away. Of course, we had the media go, oh, it's only 40 million in terms of commissioning. They can't read budgets. It's 500 million that's been transferred across to the Māori Health Authority in terms of the start. Now, in terms of health, you're talking about $12 billion. But the key with the Māori Health Authority is that our group will have a say on every single issue that pertains to Māori health in this country. That's the difference now. And you have a framework that you've never had before. It's incredible. And so we've got New Zealand Health and Māori Health, but every kaupapa Māori initiative that New Zealand Health Organisation has to traverse has to be run past the Māori Health Authority. So we're saying, don't get caught in the numbers here. We've got the framework in place. We've got the influence in place in terms of kaupapa Māori issues, and this is a chance of a lifetime. Of course, you would have heard from the other side, from those lovely Māoris in ACT, that you know, we're racists and separatists. You know, so we got, you know, you've got one group saying, oh, this is the most racist, separatist thing ever happened, and then you've got our mates in the Māori Party saying, oh, geez, bloody Maoris can't do bugger all. You know, it's a bit of a sellout. You know, so we know that it's not. We know that we're somewhere in the middle, and we know that, and as I said, the Māori Party are saying that, but on the other side of things, they're going, oh, well, actually, it's really, really good, but we have to say this because we've got to keep our brand going, you know. And so this Māori Health Authority is one of the most proudest initiatives that all of us, in terms of Māori MPs, have been involved with. And you would never have thought you would have got it in the mainstream party. You know, this is from the Māori, this is from the Labour Party that, you know, set up foreshore and seabed. People talk to me about that. They go, oh, they did this and that. And this is from a Labour Party that abandoned the closing of the gaps. Shows you that way that Labour has adapted, changed policy, changed members, brought in wonderful people like Panucci and Kelvin. And, you know, like people don't understand that parties change and adapt. And in my view, Labour's come back to its roots and embraced a lot of initiatives that you never would have thought would have been the case before. And so that's why I'm proud as a member of the Māori caucus to be part of that. And next week you've got Matariki. I mean, who would ever have believed that this country would have been celebrating a holiday based on tikanga Māori? It's just magnificent. And that's why I'm saying don't underrate what we're doing. And here's the other side of that is we say our holiday, and Kelvin traverses it well, because he says it's not just about a holiday, it's about a beautiful story, it's about whakapapa, it's about tikanga, it's about our ancestors. That's what Matariki is all about. And here we have a Pākehā Prime Minister fronting that, and New Zealand buying into it. Shows you how far we've come. You know, and I say don't ever underrate that. We've pushed that up. We've pushed history in schools. You know, we never had history in the schools. If you don't have history in the schools, you'll never you'll never be able to explain the Māori grievance, the Māori history. History in the schools, we've got Matariki up, we've got the Māori Health Framework up, we've got record funding right across the spectrum. Kelvin got, not this time, but last time, record funding in terms of Kōrero. We've got funding in terms of Māori education. I'm saying to our people, understand the position we're in. And we've got another side saying, oh, this is all separatist, this is racist. It's far from it. It's just about uplifting a group of people, our people, and giving our people an opportunity in terms of equity. And so as a group of Māori, we've negotiated that. We've pushed it forward as Māori Minister of Development. Now the Minister of Broadcasting, which I'm really proud that the Prime Minister gave me just last week. I'm able to push Māori perspectives through. Broadcasting is a perfect example. You know, we have been misrepresented across TV and radio, you know, and sometimes some of our people, like our Minister Mahuta, has been subject to some terrible things. I don't know if you follow the social media sometimes. It's disgraceful the way they've painted Nanaia in terms of the three waters and all that. No minister should be subject to the type of racism that she's been subjected to. But she's got a lot of fortitude and she's got a lot of strength and she's an absolute example of mana wahine. And I can see there's so many women here today, so you would all understand what I'm saying. But we're really proud of her. I'm really proud to be part of a Māori caucus that has been led by your member, who's done a bit of an unsung hero for us, and he's led us well in terms of the Māori caucus. We all work together as a team, but he's our most senior Māori member, as deputy leader of the caucus, Māori caucus. But people ask about it, and we put our views up. We engage with our colleagues, Pākehā, well, not just Pākehā, of course, Venetia, because you're not Pākehā, but our ethnic mates, our Pacifica mates, and we traverse what's good for our country. And I think the bottom line is now we've got in my view, we're making a lot of progress. 1.2 billion at this, in terms of targeted funding, in terms of this election, is something not to be sneezed at. So I'm saying to our mates in the Māori Party, be careful. If you keep booting us all the time, those polls could change. Just finally on those polls, we're not too worried about the polls. We are about even at the moment. You know, they're ahead on some polls, we're ahead on some. There's nothing much in it. We think that when the boss gets some clean air, that she'll be able to deal to Mr. Luxon and all of them, because she's one of the most brilliant presenters and negotiators you could get. So we're not that worried about it, because we're 15, 16 months out in terms of the elections. And in our game, they say a week is a long time in politics. So lovely to be here. Happy to take questions after the kōrero. Kia ora no tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Come on, grab a seat.
For me, the story that this Labour government is about is one that reminds me of a T.S. Eliot quote, where he talks about the still point in a turning world where past and future gather. And it's those special moments in time where we think about our history, but also the big challenges like climate change and poverty and war, like housing, that are facing all of us. And the budgets, this is the fourth, wellbeing budget, have been all based around that philosophy of thought. It's that one word for me that changes everything. It's wellbeing. I have a lot of international colleagues. I'm an international human rights lawyer by trade, and when the government released that first wellbeing budget, it turned heads internationally. It said something that we probably all know, but actually a lot of governments don't operate like that. And it said that people matter first. That's what the first wellbeing budget was about in terms of investing in mental health. It's what the second and the third wellbeing budgets were about, addressing COVID. I love the sound of background children. I've got three. And that's what this budget is about as well. It's about securing our future, but putting well-being first, putting people first. So I'm actually just going to tell you a few stories of my last week, which in my mind show how this budget is still about people. I'm the MP for Upper Harbour. It's not far from here. It starts about 5 minutes drive that way, if I've got my directions right. But on Wednesday, so 2 days ago, I was with Tamati Kofi in Rotorua. And I was actually there to engage with the multicultural community. But as part of the day, he took me out to Kupu, which is the Māori Writers Festival. And we sat and listened to this stunning story about a local guide, Matariki, who was a powerful women's advocate, very independent, who travelled to Oxford, I think it was, and then came back to her people, wrote, was published, and so it was a story I hadn't engaged with before. But it occurred to me as I was sitting there how important it is that we continue to fund the stories of people. That happens for ethnic communities as well, and it's something that our government values. We understand that those stories are part of the well-being that we all need as part of society. And what this budget does is invest 50 million into that space, into the arts and culture space, part of which is protecting Kao Māori as well. We do that with multicultural stories too. While I was there, they talked about the first ever Tamil Māori conference to happen on the 2nd of July in Rotorua. These are things that don't just happen, they happen because we have a government that values well-being and doesn't just see it as one-dimensional, but sees it as health, as jobs, as housing, as arts and culture. Here in Upper Harbour, what it means for us, I've surveyed the electorate and the same things frequently come out. Health is always one of the top things that matters. And whenever I talk to families, the things that they're most concerned about are that we have a fully functional hospital in Waitakere, that we have a fully functional hospital in North Shore. And the local MPs here are really passionate about this. So it was a huge privilege to go in with Minister Little and Minister Verrill earlier this week to open a special baby care unit there. So this is for babies who might be born slightly early with difficulties. And I spoke to a mum in Hobsonville Point whose daughter was 4. She came in and she talked about how when she had her baba, she was in the equivalent of the special babies unit at the time, and there were loads of babies packed into one room. They didn't have any space between them. You could have one adult there. Now the facility can have up to 18 babies all in their own space. But more than that, family whānau can be there with them. There are the equivalent of apartments, literally apartments adjoining these rooms. It is going to make a huge difference. And I think what was impressive to me is that that philosophy of well-being is now carried through from our government to the leaders in our health sector as well. Dale was the head of the DHB, was just talking about the profound difference it would make to the well-being of the whānau. In the same way, we've invested a huge amount, 60 million, into creating a 30-person inpatient bed at Waitakere. That is huge. There will also be new ICU facilities there. There's more to do in that space, and your local MPs here will continue to advocate for Waitakere Hospital. We're seeing the same investment in the North Shore as well. We'll have a new elective surgery ward there, and we'll have $10 million invested into end-of-life machine care equipment that has been sorely needed. This is real stuff, and I know it well. I have 3 babies, none of whom were born at Waitakere. None. We're investing in the services that West Auckland needs. The other big issue that I'll flag is education. A lot of parents tell me they struggle with many things, transport, employment, other things. And then they often say at the end of the meetings, but I tell you what, if we want you to focus anywhere, it's on the kids. Make sure we've got good schools and they're okay and they're well cared for in that schooling environment. We can cope with the other things. And we are looking at the other areas as well, but school has been a real focus for me. And this is a government that's invested hugely in school infrastructure and growth. I was out at Colwell School in Massey, and you can see the redevelopment happening there. They're growing, and now we're getting facilities to match that. There were 1,600 new school build projects across Auckland. Half of them are already complete. That's new buildings, that's new shade sales, that's upgrades that should have happened for a long time. There are a lot of these West Auckland schools that now also get their Healthy Free School Lunches program. And again, Rob Taylor from Colwell will tell you that it doesn't just make a difference. It does make a difference. It's groundbreaking, he says. And when I was at Rotorua Girls High, Sarah, who wasn't an advocate of this to begin with, the principal there said the same thing. This is groundbreaking for these girls. Some of this is their only meal, and you cannot believe how transformative it has been for them. So schools has been a huge focus for us here out in the Northwest. There are new schools popping up at Scott Point for us and Hobsonville Point too. That has absolutely been a focus for us. I won't take any more time talking, and I might hand back to the Minister. And I do have to apologise for having to head off at 2:30. I'm away a lot during the week, so my husband's one job that he gives me during the week is to pick up the kids on a Friday.
Look, politics is it's starting to get real nasty. It's starting to get real dirty. And basically you can put it under the label of racism. It started under Judith Collins attacking Willie and Nanaia around the UNDRIP and the He Puapua report, and it's just carried on even though Judith Collins is no longer the head of the National Party. And I just want to touch on a few things before I get into the budget stuff. And it's what Willie raised about the behaviour that Nanaia is experiencing purely because she's a Māori woman on the highest stage in the world. She's a foreign minister going around doing incredible work. She's also the Minister of Local Government. You know, this Three Waters argument, it's not actually about the pipes and that it should be about. It's actually about Nanaia, and it's getting personal. You know, the pipes across New Zealand and the water infrastructure are broken to the cost to the tune of $180 billion over the next 30 years. Now, if anyone here can tell me that our councils across the country are going to stump up with $180 billion to fix all the pipes and that, then you've got another thing coming. I was just reading in my local paper up in Kaitaia there about the awa that runs past Ahipara School out to 90 Mile Beach, where everyone, even about 30 years ago, used to swim and gather kaimoana. It's the sewage is running into there, people are getting sick. A week after reading that one, I read about the women pipes and drains up in the Waitangi River. Again, sewage running into the Waitangi River and out to the Bay of Islands. And then we have all these people saying, "Oh, you know, Three Waters, we don't need it." I tell you, we do need it. When I talk to Pākehā audiences, they're sort of predominantly, you know, no, it's not that much of a problem. You talk to Māori, because we're the ones that gather and swim and all that sort of stuff in our rivers and creeks. Māori get it. So I tell you, the attacks on the Three Waters are as much about attacks on the Nanaia and on Māoridom as they are about the pipes and drinking water and all that sort of stuff. That's the first point I wanted to make. Second point I wanted to make was around what Willie said. There are things that this government is doing now that you would never have dreamed of even 10 years ago. The Matariki being one of them, and I'll talk a bit about Matariki soon, but also the histories in schools. Now, I'll give you an example of something that absolutely stunned me. I was asked a question because opposition politicians can write written questions to us and we have to answer them. And Shane Reti, who's a whanaunga of mine from up north, he wrote, does to the Minister of Māori Crown Relations, that's me, do I believe that Ngāpuhi ceded sovereignty in 1840? And I just said, I believe, and then I wrote the text of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. That's what I believe. They didn't even recognise the text of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. How on earth can we possibly have a debate about Te Tiriti o Waitangi if they can't recognise it? Because if they can't recognise it, they can't understand it. They can't understand it. How can we have a debate about Te Tiriti o Waitangi? So there's the whole kōrero around co-governance has been a sort of flick of the language from he puapua and all that sort of stuff to sort of a subtle change in the tone and that, oh, it's about co-governance. Co-governance is really about, you know, what are people scared of? That they're going to lose something because Māori get to have a say in something? No one's going to lose anything. It's all about us coming together as a nation. So who would have thought 10 years ago we'd be having these sorts of conversations about Māori actually having a say? Now, as the Minister of Māori Crown Relations, Te Arawhiti is the agency that I'm in charge of. And people ask, well, what's the role of Te Arawhiti? We've got Te Puni Kōkiri, which Willie is the Minister for Te Puni Kōkiri. Te Puni Kōkiri is about supporting Māori to grow and develop. Te Arawhiti, and here's a little story that goes with it. You can imagine there's a river. On one side of the river is Te Ao Māori, and on the other side of the river is Te Ao Pākehā. What connects those two worlds across that river is a bridge called Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Now, the question is, who's crossed that bridge most often? And it's almost exclusively been Māori. We've crossed from our world over the bridge into the Pākehā world. We've learned the language, the customs, the way people think and behave and all that sort of stuff. And the question is, how many times have people crossed from Te Ao Pākehā into Te Ao Māori? The answer is it has happened, but it's very rare. There are some people who have crossed over that world and understand our language and customs and culture. Well, my vision of Aotearoa for my mokopuna and great mokopuna is that people are just crossing that world freely, switching in and out of languages freely, and just being totally comfortable in each other's world. But we've got a long way to go. And my role as the Minister of Māori Crown Relations is to get all our government agencies and ministries and departments out of the Pākehā world, cross that bridge into the Māori world, and start listening to and talking to and understanding why Māori think and behave and feel and carry on as we do, so that Māori don't have to continuously justify our world point of view. So that it's about them listening and asking us as Māori, so what are the solutions to the issues that we see? That's sort of like what co-governance is, just having those conversations and working together. So I thought I just wanted to raise those things because the race issue disguised under co-governance and that is going to come up more and more often, and we as Māori are going to be the brunt of those conversations. Right, aside from Te Arawhiti, I'm responsible for corrections, I'm responsible for children, which is Oranga Tamariki, and I'm responsible for Māori education. Did I say that? Corrections, Oranga Tamariki, Māori education, and Te Arawhiti. So I'll just go through a few of the things in each of my portfolios. First of all, Māori education. Now, only 5% of our taitamariki Māori go to kura kaupapa o kohanga reo. 5%, and it's been that way for a couple of decades now, despite the best efforts of everyone working in kura kaupapa. Another 5% attend bilingual units in mainstream schools. So in total, we have 10% of our taitamariki Māori in some sort of immersion education. Now I've said, that's not good enough. We need to change that. And I've said to the Ministry of Education, by 2040, so in 18 years' time, I want to have trebled those numbers. So that means 20,000 Māori children in some sort of immersion education. By 2040, I want there to be at least 60,000. So that means, and I think we've got about 60 kura kaupapa now, and a number of kohanga reo, I'm not sure of the exact number, but by 2040, I want there to be another 250. So At the moment, it's really hard to establish a kura kaupapa. I just want to kick down the barriers and establish more kura kaupapa. We need 3,500 more trained, fluent kaiapu. We need to have more resources, that is, teaching resources in Te Reo Māori, so so that teachers can teach. They need to be regionally appropriate, and we need the resourcing. So we need funding. So there's a lot of work that we're trying to get underway around increasing the number of our tautamariki Māori, because I say that access to your language and culture is a right, it is not a privilege. We've just got to make it easier for our young people to be taught in Te Reo Māori. The stuff like the histories at schools and that is all sort of part of the bigger work program to make education more relevant for our tautamariki. So in this year's budget, we've got about $200 million to go to support Māori education. There's some pūtea there to build a couple more schools, some more pūtea to improve some schools that are that need improved maintenance and things like that. So that's in Māori education. My next portfolio of oranga tamariki, and we all know, we've all heard the criticisms against oranga tamariki over the last few years, and they've all been pretty much justified. So when I became the minister in 2020, I established a Ministerial Advisory Board, a group of preeminent Māori to basically tell me, I said to them, your job is to look under the hood of oranga tamariki and tell me what's going on. And I want to know what's and all. So they produced, so the board was made up of Matt Tukaki, Dame Nader Glavish, Sir Mark Solomon, and Shannon Harpura, who used to be the chief social worker. So they had a good look under the hood of oranga tamariki. They wrote this report called Te Kahu Aroha, and basically it confirmed all the other reports, and it just said things have got to change. Now, in that report, there are 5 areas. 4 of them sort of OT things that they have to sort out. The one area in that report that is most critical and most important to me is to answer the call that Māori have been saying for so many years. We know how to look after our tamariki, give us the resources and the decision-making capabilities, and let us do it, keep out of our way. And that is the direction that oranga tamariki is moving in. So I've been going around the country talking in communities here, there and everywhere. Yesterday I was in Kaitaia talking about this very thing. I've been to Hamilton, I've been to Dunedin, Christchurch, and I've gone at Whangarei, I've gone around and said to all the community providers, the NGOs, hapu and iwi, we're going to turn up on your doorstep in a couple of months' time, and we're going to say to you, you guys are now going to take over the decision making, and we'll give you the resources to look after the tai tamariki in your community. What are you going to, how is that going to happen? So start thinking about it now, so that when we turn up, you're not sort of scratching your head for 6 months, you've already given it some thought. When I've said this to them, there's been quite shocked silence, because it's a total change from oranga tamariki being in communities up on the ivory tower, going, oh, you can have some pūtea to do this in your contract, and you can have some pūtea, but you guys miss out. It's now community, look at what your needs are, and you guys will be making the decisions. And so there's some really amazing forward work going on in communities. And to help those discussions to occur, we've got, I think it's $23 million in the budget. But that's the most important thing. People, you might have noticed that some of the criticisms of oranga tamariki have sort of settled a little bit, but we've got a lot of work to do. And it's going to involve communities making those decisions. And what's good for the Kaitaia community will be different than what's needed in Gisborne or Taihape or wherever. We're working closely in 5 communities, Waikato Tanenui, Kahunumu, Ngaitahu, Taumaranui as a township, and now 2 communities up in Tokerau, so Tai Tokerau cluster. We want those pilots, if you want to give it that name, to sort of be in place over the next couple of months. Hopefully by the end of the year we can spread things out into more communities. But people are going to see some big change, and it's long overdue and it's well needed. My last portfolio was in corrections. Now, when I became the minister, when we became government in 2017, we're at a prison capacity crisis. Our prison population peaked at about 10,800 soon after we became the government. 52% of that 10,800 were Māori. The justice sector projections from 2017, when we became government, to this point in time, said that if we didn't do things differently, we would now have over 13,500 people in prison. We would have had to build every 3 years, set aside at least $1 billion for one of those American-style mega prisons where we just keep locking more and more people up. We became government and said we have to do things differently. And so we set the target of reducing the prison population by 30% over 15 years. We achieved that in 4 years. So the prison population peaked at 10,800. It was meant to be 13,500 at this point in time. As of yesterday, it's 7,700. So there's been a significant reduction. The criticism that's thrown at us is, you're just letting people out. Kelvin Davis, you're letting people out of prison. Well, I don't have that ability. The Minister of Corrections is not a judge who just determines who comes in, and is not a member of the parole board who determines who goes out the other end. So we've reduced the prison population. We've got 1,200 fewer Māori in prison now than we did in 2017. Our Māori prison population is at a 17-year low. The imprisonment rate of Māori is down 29%. Double bunking has been halved. And probably the statistic I'm most proud of is our women's population has been halved. We peaked at 843 women in prison a couple of years back. It's now 400. We got down to 420 something. It's probably now about 440, I think. Thank you. Keep going. We know that we have to. The needs of women in prison are different to the needs of men, but they're treated like as if they were men. And we know that our mums in prison are still being mums. They're still organising who's picking up baby from school. They're still organising kai. They're still organising what the kids are doing on the weekend. Their needs are different. And corrections has been slow to recognise that. We put in place a women's strategy start of last year. Things are changing. Things are changing in corrections, and I've got to take my hat off to corrections, because when I became the minister, they were hated, and that extended to the feeling towards corrections officers. Let me tell you, corrections officers are doing a great job in the main. There are some that still need to come on board the program, but they're doing a fantastic job. I take my hat off to them. And this year we've got $240 million to do more good stuff in corrections. So those are my portfolio areas, and that's some of the money that we're getting in. I just want to finish off by talking a bit about Matariki, because this weekend coming, next Friday is the launch of Matariki. And a lot of people out there will go, yay, it's another public holiday, excellent. Time to do whatever, just have a day off and like to sleep in. Yes, it is a day off, but no, it's not just a holiday. Matariki is the world's first Indigenous Day celebration. This is about nationhood. This is about us as New Zealanders of all stripes coming together as one. Our Pacific whānau, our tuatana from Moananui, Kiwa, they celebrate Matariki or Puanga in different ways. And they've got their own name for it, which sounds a lot like Matariki. It might be Matariki or Matariki or something like that. But it binds us together. Us as Māori, with our Pacific Island whanaunga. It binds us to, Matariki binds us all together, and it is an incredible celebration. Now, each of the whetū in Matariki have a name, and each of those whetū in Matariki have like a purpose or a theme. And the whole kaupapa is about celebrating our past, acknowledging our present, and preparing for our future. And we can do that as a country in a way that no other country really does. Matariki, the opening, the launch on next Friday down at the Papa is being televised live into Australia and the United States. It just goes to show that the level of interest in something that we as a government have done. And again, this isn't a divisive thing. This isn't just solely for Māoris. This is for the whole country, and to bring us all together, where some people and some players in the country are trying to drag us apart for their own silly political needs. Anyway, those are just, we've got $5 million for resources and that for schools to teach it in, and actually for areas to celebrate in their own way. I think there's 60 different kaupapa that we funded across the motu, so that each takiwā can celebrate in a way that's special to them. So look, that's basically my little kōrero on a number of kaupapa. Again, I'd just like to thank you all for coming to hear us today, myself, Willie and Venushi, and we're really keen to answer any questions you may have. You may have questions on portfolios that we're not responsible for, but we'll try to do our best to address them, but we might have to get back to you. Yasmin's going to make a note of questions that we and people who we need to get back to. So once again, thank you all very much for your time today. Kia ora. Who's first? Can't tell me that 3 politicians solved all the world's problems in one. Cool.
Don't be shy.
Sure.
Ina katoa tako, dami mo kita pagmana nasidayin kumane kiwana no yata pwede nera. Just among my own surround from my my boy might get some questions for you guys today. I suppose related to the kaupapa you've talked about. So I think just from our CE, she just really wants to know, it sort of gets kicked down the list a bit, but what are your guys' commitments to, I suppose, reform around our Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act?
What?
Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, and our, and any, I don't know, any sort of an agenda you guys have around that, because obviously we know that's a huge pillar of our people, and we're not really seeing too much action around it. So yeah, what are your guys' whakaaro around it?
So I'm the Deputy Chair of the Justice Select Committee, so this doesn't happen fairly frequently. We've also obviously just had the announcement that the new Minister will be stepping into the justice space, which is very exciting, particularly Alan stepping into that space. So I suspect that there will be discussions on that front coming up. There are members' bills that are operating in this space as well, so there are several conversations. I don't believe that there are any commitments in terms of actively reviewing, but I can certainly say that we're top of the conversation for the Justice Select Committee. I think it would be for the new Minister to receive the briefing in the justice space and then make some decisions in terms of what that might involve as those campaigns, whether it does cover the advertising industry as well, or it stands for the finance.
In terms of what's the major concern from your side? The proliferation of our needs.
Yeah, so I think it's a few things. So, and maybe Minister Davis might also have some knowledge of it, but we also have the link to FASC. We know anecdotally, and I think there's some developing research around the fact that it's a key driver for a number of cancers, like a key sort of, there's some causal sort of links between a number of cancers and other health issues that we see for our whānau. So it's a pretty big priority, I suppose, in the public health, on the public health radar, but more coming from that angle.
Yes, so my, just as a matter of interest, my brother is a judge. And he once said to me, if he could snap his fingers and alcohol disappears from Aotearoa, 90% of his mihi would disappear. So, you know, and I guess that Paddy Gower documentary, not that I've seen it, I read a bit about it, sort of also highlights the our attitudes to drinking. We are concerned about communities not having about their voice being lost in terms of where alcohol outlets are established and their proximity to schools and things like that. But, you know, like I say, Venetia said, she's sort of on the committee and is doing a lot more, she's a lot more involved in it. I mean, if you want further information, I guess we can, you know, Jasmine can take your name in there. But, you know, as someone who doesn't drink a lot, myself, you know, I've got real concerns personally about the access to alcohol for our young people, the effect it has on their developing brains, the effect it does have on the body, you know, all the sugars. We know sugar has an impact on cancers and stuff like that. So anyway, it's a whole heap of stuff, you know, a whole heap of negatives. The one big problem that we have is that so many people drink that it's a real hard thing to push. Good, I still.
I just wanted to add something that Wahine said over here. What we know about, a little bit about how it contributes to the well-being of our we don't know a lot about the medical side of it. We do see it a lot in our sexual and I remember during COVID, the first thing we did was to bring the police and cutting down all of the alcohol stores because we had major concerns around that on our increase within the homes we call it. Now, and based on some of the information, and this is really not statistical data here, but based on some of the experiences of our partner, that actually did contribute in the homes, that there was more alcohol being brought into the homes. We were lucky enough to overcome that by having third parties that would come in from other places, so a lot more money was going in that way. In saying that, I've been listening to what is happening at the moment, looking at the age, the drinking age coming down again, I was talking about, and what's proposed for the future. I wondered if Labour is leading that in that direction. There is a concern also. When they cut the smoking, when they said no more smoking, that didn't stop everybody from smoking. Yes, it did decrease that, but many families suffered a lot more because of the increase of the price of cigarettes, and it hasn't, in fact, gone right up to country. So I think it is a major concern, like I was saying, around what do you do? How do you do that? You know, and cutting it off most probably is not right. I think I'd like to know how Labour tends to actually move towards the direction where we, as a community, will decrease the amount of alcohol that is injected into our community because of the major effect on our farmers. So,
yeah, there is a push. You know, I will say from ministers and all that there is certainly a push in terms of the reduction of that alcohol shops and all that. You know, we have a number of MPs who come in with community backgrounds. I've seen the same thing in South Auckland. You know, when I was running our community organisation, we had bottle shops set up by our schools. You know, As Māori, it has to be, I always have said that it's a real tricky one, because when you look at it, you have to run a balanced type of strategy, you know. Like I've met with a lot of our groups through the years, and I said, you know, they used to have special rules where we weren't even allowed to train, you know, and some of our old people remember those sort of times, you know. The reality is that, you know, when our people came back from the war, they weren't even allowed to pubs. And so there is a bit of a history too in terms of fairness and rights, and you know, you're balancing those rights with the reality in terms of whānau and the way that it's affected our families in the community. And so, you know, it's not easy, because you don't want us to have some sort of different rights to everyone else, you know. And so you've got that, you're balancing that. So our community groups have to talk about responsibility in terms of whānau and that. But you know, because I have to remind our people, you can't be the big nanny state sometimes and say no drinking for these sort of ones here, but it's okay over here, you know. But I think with this government, actually, you understand, you know, you've got we understand. I understand devastation at community level, having run whānau water programs, domestic violence programs. My agency is very supportive of Matariki Davis and a lot of the work she's doing in terms of the sexual violence stuff. We've launched her sexual, you know, the big sexual violence strategy at Marae, and so you know, we're working in tandem with her in terms of getting to the nub of the problem. You've got to get in with those families, you know, and that's why what I talked about earlier, the targeted funding, particularly with community groups, is the way forward, because who knows the best way forward? A lot of these community groups, whether they're whānau water or in different NGOs, we've got to get in with the people. And so we have said as a Māori caucus, particularly to our mainstream agencies like the MSDs, that hey, we better start devolving a lot of that money across to some of our agencies, our Māori groups, our community groups, who can see who know where the future could go. And it's part of that by Māori, for Māori communities knowing better, and through those types of strategies we get to the alcohol problems, smoking problems, etc.
And I'll just add that one of the biggest points of intervention are the drug and alcohol laws that this government has established and then rolled out. So when we're seeing problems in the community, rather than saying the way from all of this is through punishment, looking at the issue of addiction and really funding this wraparound services for the family who are affected, so that it isn't a repeat cycle. And those have been expanded in the last few years as well. I think there are other buckets of questions that we validly raising around the age of access, about communities' ability to challenge licensing agreements, around, for me, personally, alcohol advertising, and where that's entitled to sit. Those are all very live issues that are absolutely being discussed around the House at the moment. But that first point, so intervention and how we intervene, that is a change of approach that this government is taking in terms of establishing the alcohol and drug force.
Can I just quickly acknowledge the money that brought up around the games that we have in this money in those different areas? And I just want to acknowledge that, because we have lots of ways of participating in many of the strategies that will be included in the strategies that look at pathways to healing and part of that. And we were just in Lisbon with with OT around the care of Māori Tamariki in here. So we went with them, and some of the things that we did there blew us away, because we hadn't seen that before. Getting the support behind it from some of those from OT to actually start to look at better way of ensuring that in this particular case, Māori and others are getting this, and getting this sort of that need. And in reference to the strategy that our Ministerial was Jared, I know that that's been major for us in the sectors of responding to violence, sexual violence. I just want to acknowledge some of that work to say we're here for you. And Matariki, cheers, you know, and we're just so thrilled. And working hard to work with our partners and to increase the understanding and knowledge around Matariki and what we're up to it. To hear this year that we now have celebration coming forward, and and one other thing I just want to with regards to education, within coming just recently of one of our own Whanaunga, Matua Joe Hawke, and her an amazing kōrero from the whoever was second as a minister, around how what happened on this point and the histories of and work that was done by our Raiona will go into education. Now, I just have to say, wow, you know, those are some of the big games that we've had, and it has been thanks to the Labour Party. Oftentimes we have to try to change when governments change. We find ourselves and we're really grateful for what happens with other governments. But this isn't about feeling grateful, this is about appreciating writing for all of us in relation to the things that we're doing with this, with the sexual government. So purely.
Yeah, just in terms of the Bastion point that you made, when I was at the intermediate, so I was about 4-1 when that was happening, and the impression we were given was that there's these naughty Māoris who are won't get off someone else's land. That narrative is just going to be turned on its head, and the truth of Bastion point is good. Yeah, other questions?
I just wanted to know, you spoke a lot about things that have been involved with OT and down south. I just wondered what happened in Auckland. I know in September last year, we had a press conference that said that all Section 78s to virtually stop, but it's still happening. So I just wondered what's implemented in Auckland for these procedures.
Yeah,
and
so
in the court as well, because there's a lot of things that get implemented. Yeah.
What I said was that we do things differently, and the numbers of Section 78, so these are non-notified uplifts of babies, have reduced significantly, over the last year or so, because there is what I've said needs to happen is that instead of Oranga Tamariki making a decision to uplift a baby, if they're working with community providers, and the community providers are supporting that mum and a baby or an unborn baby, that if those providers still say, we've done everything we can and we still think this baby needs to be uplifted, then OT, as the statutory sort of lead. But the trigger for the uplift comes from the community, and then they will go in together. The other thing to do the uplift, the other thing to remember is most uplifts, the babies still stay with the parents, even though technically they're uplifted, because that they can work with them, but it just means that authorities have the opportunity to sort of help protect the baby. I will make no excuses. If there's a baby who's in dire harm, and a baby needs to be uplifted, that still needs to be reserved to happen. But it's just being done differently. It's not OT just bowling in, holds bolus like they used to and just taking babies. It has to be really justified.
So the accountability to it is relied on the community providers rather than How does it
Yeah, that's because OT is still involved in the statutory side of things. Ultimately, OT maintains accountability, but they're guided by the community. If OT wasn't there, then and the accountability I don't want to dump something that on the community providers so that they're sort of literally left holding the baby if something goes wrong. The Crown still needs to have a part to play. The best way I can describe it is, at the moment, OT has this much influence in communities, and communities have that much influence. Over time, that influence is going to grow, so communities have this much, and OT has that much. That's sort of trying to capture it in a nutshell, the way things are going to change. But there will always be a place for oranga tamariki for that real hard and the statutory stuff. But communities, like the conversation I had yesterday in Kaitaia, are really grabbing hold of the opportunity and saying, no, we're going to do things this way. Yeah, I was going to tell a story about what the providers said up north yesterday that, gotta watch it how I put it, but basically they said that the manager of the OT, we're going to manage that. So, and I think that's great.
So is it the same in Auckland? Like what's happening?
We haven't, just to get back to that, where we looked at those 5 different areas for pilots. We considered one in Auckland. It is just a little bit more complicated and complex in Auckland, but when those 5 sort of pilots, if you want to call them pilots, sort of go through their processes, then I want something to be happening, to be rolled out next in an area of Auckland. Most likely it would be South Auckland, if I'm honest. But we just don't want to just do the whole country at once and get it wrong everywhere. We just want to make sure that we refine what we're doing and learn our lessons. But it will, and I want it to happen at pace too, because we have an election in 18 months' time, 16 months' time, whatever it's going to be. Yeah, I hope I sort of addressed it, but we can talk later. So.
Kia koutou, ngā minita, mo te kōrero I Wainganui mātou, te wānanga hoki o mō te mani, te pāpai. So this is a question to do with what's been said already, but it's also from my roles in Māori Council, Māori Women's Welfare League, that's in education, and it comes in relation to the Tohunga Suppression Act, as well as other things, health or not healthy, that have happened in the interim, and the debate over how qualified Māori doctors actually are, and it's to do with rongoa. So in relation to the Māori Health Authority, I'd like to consider where the money goes to in relation to rongoa Māori, something that a lot of us value highly, but note that it has been diminished in terms of its power over history, and so that's the question.
Yeah, first of all, our Māori doctors, in my opinion, are highly qualified. Yes. I don't want to denigrate their skills whatsoever. And there's been 6 years studying to be a doctor, and I like to think they're as good as every other doctor in Aotearoa. In terms of rongoa and that, to be honest, I don't really know. The thing is that Willie was saying is with the Māori Health Authority, that will influence areas of Māori health. And so if there are alternative practices, I guess it's over to them to determine what part it plays. But we're certainly not, as a government, going to say, me pēnā koe. So it really comes down to the conversations that communities will have and the Māori Health Authority will have around any sort of specific area. Yeah. So, if you're asking how much money was given for rongoa Māori, I don't know. I don't know if there was, but that's part of the conversation to have into the future with, as the Māori Health Authority gets established and works out the direction that it's heading.
Yes. Can I just note what we have said, people from one island now, come to Tokerau. As you see, it's created enough for all one island, for people to find them. Now, I know it's not what you're actually here to do that way, but I know it's something actually. Can
I just add to that? Look, I'm ACC Associate Minister, so and what you're saying, Stella, is right. One of the things I've brought in the last 2 years is specific strategies around this. So we've got a Māori strategy around the thing we're talking about. So the ACC has been way off the mark, and they have recognised that. And so I just met with our crew on Thursday, actually, and this type of cope-up is coming up. So there's an actual recognition to what ACC never did before, was that there's no real recognition over midi, over Rongoa, and stuff that was dear to us. And a lot of our practitioners have been factored out. They are now actually being factored in. So,
that's pretty much what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. It's only just come in the last 12 months, but we're just getting those messages out.
And then there's a car week to
Yeah,
have standards about that.
We've got a car week set up. I've got an ACC. Just come and get in touch with my office. I've got an ACC Māori week in the next in about 3 weeks. It's been my third one in a row. They've been great doing. The first one was I haven't had 100 Māoris killing all my officials off at ACC, but hey, they took it on the chin, and the CEO, they never seen it before. 2 days in box of them all leading the charge, and they can only vent, which I think is important. My problem was exactly what you're talking about. Is areas like that have not been getting recognition. They are now. Also, we've got our first Māori woman on the ACC board. We had no Māori on the ACC board, and we're pushing strategies forward. We're putting people up like Inui Elder and that who've got impeccable qualifications. Bella Takiata is our representative on there, and we've got a strategy in terms of management. So overall, all is happening. Steve Mahari is the new chair of ACC, and I'm quietly confident we get more changes. But if you get in touch with my office, come to our Waitia in about 2 weeks.
Okay. Sure. And nothing to diminish Māori doctors at all. It was just that they were getting flack about their ability.
Yeah, right. So.
Yeah, they would be racist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kia ora, Ryan te Raiona, Ashton Tokuinga, and I'm Pākehā, and my question is, growing up ignorant Pākehā, and I remember Bastion Point myself, wasn't until I was sitting in the offices of Ngāti Whātara Oakai looking at the 2 treaties, age 38, I'm 45 now, and I said, what are those? And a friend there said, that's the 2 treaties. And I didn't know they're the 2 treaties. I didn't know where the problem stemmed from. And I've since researched and learned a lot from different discussions. And I was just sitting here thinking when you were talking about Bastion Point, in terms of, like the history lessons coming out in schools, what about a campaign like we have had for COVID, but a campaign that informs all the ignorant people of what the reality is and the truths were? Because now that I know, I'm not saying that I was a horrible racist in my past, but I was ignorant. And when I learned the truth, it helped me understand where New Zealand is at. And I think that there are a lot of arguments and discussions through ignorance. And if there is my question is, could a campaign that explains the history, because there will still be people out there today that don't know the truth about Bastion Point and still believe what the news said back in the day. So that was one question. And my second question about ACC is, so it might be tag team. Second question about ACC is there potential in the future that, like if I sprain my ankle, ACC pays for physio, that ACC would cover mental health being a huge issue for all of New Zealand? Would that be a sensible use of ACC to solve that big problem we have? Thank you.
It's certainly been something that's been traversed with ACC, from our mental health advocates, and it's you know, is there potential? Yeah, I think there is, but that's, you know, the first and foremost, we're trying to target mental health and record funding. It's the key for us to make sure that that funding goes to the right areas. And we have a problem sometimes in terms of bureaucracy holding up a lot of that funding in terms of community. That's where we get some criticism, but the ACC one is something that's always progressed, so, you know, potential is there.
Just to respond to your question about, you know, could there be a campaign? The reality is we've got 1,000 years of history, and and it'll take 1,000 years to teach it all. And there's been events, you know, right across Aotearoa in that time. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that local histories are taught so that they're relevant to the tamariki in the classroom. So, you know, every area's got their mauna and their awa, their stories of Māori settlement, of European settlement. So, you know, it's like, if it was a campaign, what would be the focus of the campaign? There are some sentinel moments in New Zealand's history, but even then there's, you know, hundreds of them, be it the Wahine disaster, the, you know, Springbok Tour, Bastion Point, Raglan Golf Course. You know, where does it end? So the answer is probably no, there isn't going to be one, because where would we focus and why would we choose this over that and all that sort of stuff. But across all the schools in the country over the next 100 years, you know, there's going to be, we're going to really chip away at the ignorance and just an enlightenment. You know, even in my own hapu, when we have wānanga about our hapu history, which goes back, you know, predates European history, you know, we're all sitting down and going, wow, we didn't realise that about our tupuna. So it's not all about the negative stuff and bad stuff, it's just like the enlightenment. And when I talk about ignorance, we are ignorant of our own history. Unfortunately, it's held in the hands of fewer and fewer people as our kaumata and that die off. And it's just about everyone's right to know, you know, like I said earlier, access to your culture, your history and your language is actually a right, not a privilege. And we're just trying to make it easier for all tamariki just to grow up and, you know, have a better and, I guess, less ignorant appreciation of our history. Yeah, so the history taught in Invercargill will be different to the history taught in Auckland to the history taught up north. Yeah. Thank you. Cool.
I don't think it's a question so much, it's probably a feeling. Coming here, Kōrero, we believe that there is a genuine intent and conviction, and we believe you know, we've got 280 million aside for new growth for growth tax. We've got 85 million being looked for useful, and I believe we believe it. From there is a regional agent ministry. It's still seriously thought, and also institutional rate is still alive and well. So when it comes to the allocation of those funds, I was really interested, Manisha, that 1,600 schools have been developed or have been modified and restored.
Can I just clarify that? So you remember when COVID came out, schools, every school received kutia. I think it was, depending on the size, some got 250s, up to 400,000 was the most. Yeah, so every city.
Okay. I'm sure, of course, referring to when you talked about the establishment of the 1,600 schools out in Scotland. But, you know, we had a Tanenui for public kitera that we had vision for another 200 kura also. And because, you know, there are only 5% at this time, we need to remember that we've only been, we're into our third decade, we're only 30 years in Hekeli and Kohamareo, and that versus a colonial system of 200 years. So, you know,
So we're not doing too bad. And so only doing or hope for nui ake ngā hua Māori. And I think it would be that, you know, everything that's based is not qualitative or quantitative. So we don't have that formula when it comes to funding, targeted funding. So we're not that cheap because, you know, our tūwhaka for Māori and Māori Reo and West Auckland have waiting lists. And our babies can't get out anywhere. They're full, but there is no growth plan. And, you know, I addressed the ministry and asked them the question, what rationalisation? Now, the next kura, the next Māori medium, and you don't understand Māori medium either, because why isn't it immersion Māori? You know, because Māori medium is what, 0 to 20% targeted funding for Te. And so then the next one is the Hobsonville. And it's like, well, where did that research come from? Why is the next Māori allocated funding through Māori funding being set up in or Hobsonville? You know, and so meanwhile, we don't think anything to grow. We've got bigger rights that could be bought, but it doesn't seem to be actually a genuine intent. I know from you guys, and you know, absolutely, that we've never been in a better space as far as budget allocation goes for Māori. But we expect that of you guys, because you got onto it, you know. And that's why you are, that's why we can expect that we do better now. But it's seriously flawed, because you have the vision and you have a commitment back to us, but then you've got agencies, the next level down, that are distributing the money. It stops there. That doesn't, we aren't getting the benefits of that. And when I say the benefits of that, when we talk about 25-year growth plan, we're not anywhere. There isn't tenure being sought for development. And so you're talking about another 300 schools. We had a reassessed them, well, if you don't have intention, then our next role growth, then build a school for 1,000. Do we want to do that? No, we don't. But why is this one being built in Luxembourg?
Yeah. So I'd really like to address those issues, because there's the whole purpose. Like when, you know, we've said we want to triple the numbers of Matariki. Māori medium, we're counting as 80 to 100%. Not the lower level, so it's level 1 funding. But all of those things, if there's going to be 250 more kura, but we have to have that whole network plan, you know, and we have to put them where there are going to be, there's going to be Māori role growth, and there are. So all of that is stuff that is in the pipeline for the planning, you know. So you're right, it hasn't happened, you know, there hasn't been the purchase of land. And what we're saying is that fight has got to end. And we're now going to take the fight out of the fight, and let's have a big plan of how it's all going to come about. So we're really trying to change the way it works. The other thing I said about resources and then resourcing, I agree entirely, you know, like if for equitable outcomes, the resourcing needs to change. And Hare really brought it home to me when, you know, I was having those hui with you before COVID. You know, Simon, sorry, over in Te Raki Pai Whina, we said, why have we got a basketball court? And because the funding formula is based on Pākehā schools, and because the Purakaupa chooses to be smaller, they don't get the same funding for the big gymnasium that the big high school down the road.
Yeah, but that's exactly the point, that a formula, and so we don't fit that criteria, and formula doesn't change it day to day. No, it's all quantitative. There's nothing qualitative in the criteria. You know, I guess we sort of say that if you have a look at that change that's happening in the next level down, it sits with those agencies that are looking after it. And like here, we know what you know, at the level, but you find out institutional racism is very well.
Yeah. Sure. Because the idea is we have to change the formulas. So it's not just a snap of fingers thing, that we have to actually really plan to make it, to change the system significantly. You know, it is a big corridor, it is going to happen, and the groundwork, the foundation work is underway under development now. Look, sorry. So look, we've been here quite some time, and I do appreciate that. You've got lives to live and lead, but I am really grateful. If there are no more questions that you have come, there's still pie over there, sandwiches in the urn and that. We can just mix and mingle and have a kōrero if you want, but some people may wish to head off. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for being here and engaging in the conversation. So, yeah, unless there's any pressing questions, I'll close with a
Tēnei te tūpau whakariti ki mua i o kura ngati mana e wara te ngati. Ko te me te laumu tōku ingoa, hiuri tēnei no te arawa no taini no ngāti kawiuni ki te Wairoa. Hoi no ko tahi noa pia te whāwhai nui whakaharahara, i puta i tētai o kōrero e ki ana ko te rau ngā kaupapa whakatogia te kākano ki te tonga o tāmaki. And I suppose in lots of my mahi, and I'm with their big Tani father, the Auckland Council, we received so much ago. And I'm not saying that there's not a need in South Auckland. The last time I met with you, though, I reminded you, like you remind everyone else in your mahi, that if you want to play the stats game, the stats of Henderson Messi are just about identical to that of Manu Hills. And it feels like, in the last couple of years doing this mahi, and I used to be in the kuda space, and I loved the kuda space, because you could just like stay in your bubble and look after your whānau, and my eyes are open a bit wide, and then I'm starting to see, man, how come they get all the cool pilot programs? How come they get all the funding? How come they get all these cool opportunities first? So I suppose I just want to push back on your partner. You may not have an answer, but I would love to know that kaupapa in particular, but then across the board, why does South Auckland get first dibs at everything? Kaupapa te uru o tāma.
I'll take your point on the chin. Good left, Jim.
Anyway, me ana kia koe, I was looking at you, me ana kia koe mo tō tautoro ki tā mātou kora. Hai, raui tō mahi I reira, whakapakari te reo I tā mātou hāpuri. So raui, me ana kia koe tō kai ako, tino ki me te I ngā ki ako koe I te wātia. Engari, piranga whakautu ki tō whātau. Because most Māoris are in South Auckland. And in short,
you almost convinced me. No,
it's a good time. But you've got to ask the question: where are our people? And so where are they? I know that we get a bit territorial or whatever, but we've got to ask where are our people. I do agree with what you were saying in terms of institutional racism. I'm on record of saying in every area of this country, we have examples of institutional racism, no doubt about it. We do have a problem in terms of the rollout of some of our things, some of our programs. So our job is to win the fruit here, and we get your tautoko on it. And that's great. Then it comes back, and the criticism we will get is that money, that puti gets held up when it comes to the different hapuri and agents. Because we win the big numbers, and then the money is held up, and then sometimes the money doesn't go where it should go. Other groups get in on it. You get Pākehā groups sometimes coming in on some of our puti, and it's tricky. So I accept criticism in that area, but in terms of South Auckland, I mean there is in strict numbers sense that's where our people are at, and so that's why there's our rota is to get them there. That doesn't mean to say others should miss out, but that's certainly the priority in terms of where our people are at. It's pretty simple, and it's been a challenge to actually get the organisations to start thinking, are you going to start focusing in on where the majority of our people are at. The other side of it, in terms of the health dollar, for example, our people miss out still completely. You know, South Auckland misses out, believe it or not, in terms of the two-tier distribution. So you're talking about education, you want to look at the health and how the health dollars are distributed. You've got a South Auckland community that's starved of two-tier. So it's there's a lot of challenges around this equity argument. Thank you for your part.
Spoken like someone who's lived with Māori all his life. So the quick answer is like, you know, I can look at it and I can talk to Atatu Marae and just see, yeah, it might be that we can do it in both, because I know there are issues out here. You know, Carmel Security is raising a number of issues about young people. So it's not simple.
It's good and give to you though, it's not the data thinking that where the mihi te kohatu te koha mai, I think the opportunity you guys is actually in this community that you actually it's not necessarily just our people, but the kaupapa misses out because you've actually got a really mobile Māori community in West Auckland who can pilot some of those things and then learn from it and refine it, and then you can take it to where the scaled need is, if you know what I want to go.
We're not. What's a Africa? I don't think you're teenage.
Bueno, kia ora tātou, miana ki atu, ki rātou, kawa ki tēnei o ngā poi, bueno, e rere ana ngā mihi, kia tātou, me te aha, tātou tēnei e pikau i ngā tini taumahatanga, i ngā tini wawata o ngai Māori, ki tēnei, kia nei te uru o tāmaki. Aha koa, tēnei te mahi e kia nei e tō ai te rā, e kimi tonu ana tātou i ngā ara, kia whāia ngā rauimi, ngā rawa e tikāna kia hikina wa tātou hopori. Ana reira, tōna wāpea, ka kite i te whitinga o te rā ki runga ki tēnei o tō tātou takiwa. Hoeno, kia whakakapi ake tātou i tēnei wāhanga okawa. Kia karakia tātou. O tuku te Māori tū, tuku te Māori tapu, tuku te Māori taumaha o e nei kōrero. Whakairi ruku, whakairi rangi, whakairi ki ngā pātū o tāne whakapiripiri e tū. Kia wāte anō a hine roto, kia wāte anō a tamaroto. Kia wāte anō e nei taura, e nei tauira. Kia putātū ki te taha tika, ki te taha pono ki te aroha. O tira ki te taha, ki te ai te mārama tangata i aho aho uhi. Wero, kia wātea ai tō tātou Māori. Haumi e, hui e, tāi e.
Please pray and help us.
Kia ora everybody, it's Raiona and the mete, or as we've just learned, the Munich name, Tumeki. If I say his name wrong, I can just say Tumeki. So if you've been watching, we've been here at the Atatu Community Centre. The bride's not built yet, it's another discussion. But This has been the Honourable Kelvin Davis, Anishka, and Jackson. So I don't know the names of the three politicians over here, I know two. But it's been sharing the budget and what's happening, especially for the Māori community. And of course, while it's broken for a cry after the session, reading a little bit of a rundown. So, what were your key takeaways yesterday? What you heard? Was it meaningful?
I think it was just good to opportunity to share what's concerning us, but also I think more importantly to be able to share some of the opportunities that exist for them and various levels that drop down under them in terms of what Te Uru o Tāmaki or the West Auckland community, or Māori, particularly the Māori community, and offer them in terms of opportunities for system change.
I love the point. I don't know if you heard the question earlier. If you were watching, great. If you weren't, we'll just basically paraphrase. The Mete asked why does this the parks league scheme South Auckland Māori community in West Auckland, and the announcement by Jason was basically helpless. A bigger population of people in South Auckland. A beautiful response. Pilot it here, West Auckland, and then once you've got it all sorted and learned and iterated, then take it to the bigger population to scale up. So, can you give us a couple of ideas of some examples that you've seen with pilot or saddles and that you would have thought examples that are some seats and things?
Well, there's a number, particularly that sort of come through the council space. Thinking about Manure Wahai and their maker's space. I think they're doing some things, and the way they've mobilised.
Shout out to Emma Kim. I've actually been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's
and even I guess just how they're really challenging the status quo in terms of what education looks like, particularly for those older learners or those ones that may be a little bit disconnected, even those that are first year school even, bringing them back into that environment. The mahi they've done around the Puhinui stream, and so bringing something like that out here, I think would be.
There's a Te Watanui Trust here, and Kingston River is one of the most polluted rivers in the world, and it could be the most beautiful swimming spot. I live here, walk past it, and when I heard it was the most polluted rivers in the world, I think, that's not just sewage, but it's also heavy metals that come out of commercial entities. And I just got to ask the question, like, how many years is the crap been put into the river? We could have stopped this years ago. Let's not sit around talking about it. Cool. But
I think the other big opportunity is, what is traditionally inherent in West Auckland is the way that they collaborate and the way that people work together. And whilst Willie did say that's where the numbers were, we know that good kaupapa can't always go to scale. And I think really leaning into the way that particularly the West Auckland Māori community work together, the way they mobilise. So many of the kaupapa out here, they've just done it because no one will give them the resource, so they're doing it anyway. So there's a real opportunity in this to bring some of that resource out here to support the Māori community organisations, the Māori communities to pilot some of those kaupapa and get them to a place where they can then reflect on them and refine them, and then share them where those bigger quantitative number of Māori are like South Auckland and to try to get those.
Beautiful point. Well, mate, let us get you off to get some kai. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you on the show. And we'll have more. We're going to get some more of our guests. So if you're watching, just bear with us as we go and find more of the guests. Of course, we'll be interviewing probably last while he's off for the moment. So once again, kill the bro. So as you can see, everyone's packing up the room and just going their way. I know that Kelvin has to be out of here by 3:30, so we'll be having him once he's had some conversations. There's been a lot of conversations related to his four portfolios, and so just bear with us as we get our time slot, and we'll deal with Matariki and the significance of that for New Zealand and for Māori. It's not just a national holiday; it's a huge recognition and humanity behind it. And as we heard today, I heard earlier, it's the first Indigenous holiday recognised in the world. So, and I think about the what they're doing at the moment now through NZTE, NZTech, and those organisations released by David Downs, that's New Zealand story, which is We See Tomorrow First. So there's another example of how We See Tomorrow First, New Zealand's Matariki holiday, the first Indigenous holiday in the world. So bear with me, I'll go and find some guests first. Kia ora. Kia ora. There you go. Hi. So, it's looking here into the camera. We have the Dr. Tokerau. So you are not only a local here in Atatu, but you are board. And I just want to take a moment at the conclusion of those discussions to either share with us your thoughts around what it means in terms of significance. I love the fact, I didn't know, just heard that it's the first Indigenous holiday recognised in the world. So that's just a little bit of a taste of it. What are your personal thoughts around what it means to significance?
Yeah, I was really excited when the MP Kelvin Davis talked about simply not just the holiday, it's actually recognising our past and also our future. And that's what I really love about Matariki. So education should be a really high focus in terms of how we celebrate Matariki. And I think about educating our tamariki, our children, to show that. Because what's really cool is actually our tamariki aren't quickly to parents about Matariki, because our parents do not have that sort of education within the classroom. So I think it's really cool to see our young kids talking to their parents about Matariki. And the significance of Matariki, it's a time to bring people together. It's a time to actually come up with goals for the remainder of the year as well. And I like those sort of things.
And one of the sort of things from my perspective, I think is that I learned that calendar seems to be here celebrations as well, the Chinese New Year, like the first December, and then Matariki, and I'm saying it's obviously here. But yeah, I just thought how calendar was back on that, but it's like a Gregorian calendar. Didn't know where it comes from, my old English term, but now we have what's
Maramataka?
yes,
Maramataka. So, it's a very Indigenous Māori way of looking at time. What's really cool about that is actually one of our Māori schools, one of our Māori schools actually, they've actually changed their school timetable to reflect Maramataka. It's really interesting. So, for example, most schools follow a very systematic Western approach to 10 weeks of school, 2 weeks of break, 10 weeks. So that was the college the calendar you just spoke about. But actually now, one school's following a Maramataka. It's really interesting, So having school times based on the Māori community. So, what are you doing at the moment? You were a teacher locally, and you went away to study to congratulations. And yeah, that's a good question. I'm actually running for council again, as you guys know. So I'm running for a fourth term, so especially back in 2013. And running this term, I think that it's really important to be able to contribute to ideas that support, I guess, community aspirations. I've always been about community aspirations. So I worked as a high school for 8 years at the school, high school down the road, Raiona. And so listening to the views and opinions of our community should always be the basis of how we create policy for communities. I know it can be quite difficult sometimes because so many communities think differently. It's really important to get a range of diverse of opinion, but actually it's been a really awesome idea over the last few years, and I'm really excited to be campaigning it. Well, congratulations. I look forward to being part of the council once again, being a local myself. You know, I've got your vote, right? Yeah, man. All right. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you. And now we'll get our last guest. Still streaming live, and now I've managed to bring over the Honourable Willie Johnson. Kia ora, kia ora. Kia ora. And so, you can hear me before, my name is Raiona, and it's an honour to have you on the show. And my simple question to you is, what is the significance to you? Matariki, with different parts of it, but what's your question?
I think that it's Māori, talking about something really precious in terms of the stars and the meaning and history for Matariki and views, particularly in terms of the planting, through the years, through the generations, and I think it's just a beautiful initiative, beautiful kaupapa. That all New Zealanders can get, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Some people initially had some reservations on this Maori thing or whatever. Of course, it was a Maori thing. So there's no reason why a Maori thing can't be a really good New Zealand or Aotearoa, whatever you want to do. I always say what's good for Maori is good for this country. And so this is wonderful. Yeah, there, Kelvin.
Sorry, am I meant to be on this side?
Okay. You mean to come on this side? Let me just talk about Matariki, and I think Kelvin gives a beautiful explanation in terms of the importance of Matariki. And we heard that today.
So, welcome, the Honourable Kelvin Davis.
Kia ora. Sorry, I didn't realise you were filming.
No. I left you to last because I figured you want to speak to the constituents and people. So, while I was watching the time, so right here. And the question that we've been asking, is, while we heard you earlier, some people may not have heard earlier, but the significance of Matariki is far beyond the national holiday.
Look, for me, it isn't about the holiday. It's actually about the celebration of Aotearoa as a country. Matariki is celebrated across the Pacific, around the Pacific. Their name for Matariki in many islands is very similar, sounding to our Matariki. It's about coming together as a people around a uniquely Indigenous day. But this is about it's about Aotearoa New Zealand. We've got Queen's Birthday, we've got Labour Day, and other countries have those, but this is uniquely New Zealand. So it is special, it is different. I don't know that there are any other countries that have an Indigenous day that they celebrate. The whole kaupapa around it is, it's not going to be the same day every year because our Māori astronomers have worked out, a bit like Easter actually, our Easter shifts around through March and April, the same for when Matariki rises. And so there's been a lot of work and thought gone into it. We've put some $5 million that has gone out to about 60 communities so that they can celebrate Matariki in a way that's special to them, and done in different ways. There's a whole lot of knowledge about the stars themselves and what they represent. It's a knowledge, Māori knowledge. They've all got different names. They all mean different things. They're all part of this Māori history or Māori knowledge. So it's going to be a great day next Friday. There are a number of events leading up to this. Dinner the night before, like we say, we can hear in Te Atatu. So I'll be in Wellington on the Friday, and on the Saturday I'll be here at Te Atatu, just up the road here, celebrating with the locals. Orangi Hina is the marae up the road here for the motorway. And I've been to a number of the Matariki commemorations here in Te Atatu. We've got one as a training in this very whare. But this will be the first time that it's had the significance nationwide. I guess the day off for that is just sort of like an extra bit of kinaki on top of the Matariki fire.
Oh, and I agree. For me, some of those questions I heard in the session earlier, I like the changing understanding of here it is, and understood it. So yes, bad things like opposite feedback. It's something there.
And we're saying one of the things we're worried about is people would start saying, like we say, mere krihi mete. We don't want people to say mere matariki or happy new year, hari huri, hari tauhau or whatever. It's manawatia matariki. Manawatia.
Not bad. What's wrong with me?
Oh, you women, cheap Māori.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, what's wrong with me? Manawatia.
That's right. One of the things I love is that and it's all about showing with the South Auckland Event Centre and the point of final for Māori. And actually, I was recently started investigating my Indigenous Irish background and say the same thing about Irish and Māori is tackle very serious things like the session, but lots of humour. It's like he's
a bit dry.
I'm just cut to the chase. Anyway, thanks very much, Anne.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Go, bye. Thanks very much.
Lovely day. Cheers.
Okay,
All right, team. Well, that's the end of our session. We've had at the Te Atatu Community Centre here, we've had the Honourable Kelvin Davis, the Honourable Willie Jackson, and the Honourable Venetia, who's a Member of Parliament that I'll have to look up. Three of them talked extensively around different parts of the budget and a range of questions from the audience. And of course, we just capped off with a little bit of a discussion around A Kōrero, around Matariki and what it means, the significance beyond, of course, the day off. The day off gives us something, time to celebrate, but of course, it's what we're celebrating that's so important. And I think it's a beautiful step forward for New Zealand. So with that, we'll say ka kite anō, and thank you for your time. And I'll just leave you with that. Yeah.